Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another Anatomy of a Movie as we dissect the third and maybe not so final, certainly for Caesar, Planet of the Apes in terms of the new installment, although the ninth film overall in the franchise. Stay tuned as we dissect.
Welcome to Popcorn Talk, featuring movie discussion, news, and interviews. Popcorn Talk. We talk movies. And now, here's Popcorn Talk's Anatomy of a Movie.
That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome
to Popcorn Talk, featuring movie discussion, news, and interviews. Popcorn Talk.
I think the same thing happened last week.
Why don't we retake? Because I hated my intro anyway.
I think the same thing happened last week.
Let me know when we can retake, Josh. Welcome, movie lovers, back for another Anatomy of Movie as we dissect War for the Planet of the Apes, the third and this new reboot, if you will, the ninth overall in the franchise. Stay tuned as Caesar wages war against the humans.
Welcome to Popcorn Talk, featuring movie discussion, news, and interviews. Popcorn Talk. We talk movies.
That's right. We're talking movies and we're talking War for the Planet of the Apes. Very good movie overall. We're a little bit delayed in having done it. If you're just joining us for the very first time here in Anatomy of a Movie, welcome. We always welcome new people. And hey, if you're returning, we welcome you just the same. Also, understand that we assume, especially at this point, since we're doing this a little bit later in the game, that you've seen the movie, that you want to talk specifics about the movie, so it's going to be very, very spoiler-filled. As part of what we offer to you guys, we're going to go in depth on various things, cinematography, story, obviously the visual effects, anything of that kind. And we have our notes there for you to download in the description box, so that way you can follow along, because we not get to everything, but we certainly have a lot there. So anyway, without further ado, we have Demetri Panos joining us.
Hey, movie fans. Phil, hi. How are you?
I'm good. I'm excited to talk about this movie.
Me too.
It's a very good movie.
I agree. Yeah.
Great way to kind of end Caesar's journey, if you will.
Yeah, let me ask you something, because with me, Matt Reeves' flourish storytelling really caps off this trilogy. And I don't know, for me, this is a trilogy that each movie that came out was better than the next. So, we had Rise of the Planet of the Apes, which I thought was okay. And I know that it was under a different helmer, but I thought it was okay. But it was really Dawn that got my attention. And I remember talking about Dawn here. And then this one was like, just a wonderful culmination of this trilogy. And it's rare that a trilogy, they get better. And this one does it. And I think that it's all because of, Matt Reeves' technology performance. But it was, I saw this in 3D as well, and Reeves' composition of shots, I thought, was just striking as to where he would frame characters and what he'd have in the background and the vistas that he had. This journey, because this was in a sense a road trip movie, going across like country or making it up north, which I thought was amazing. I also felt that he's able to direct big scale and make it look good, right? I mean, the action sequences, the war sequences were really intense and awesome. But he also composed like intimate shots very well. Like when they're at the ski lodge, or when we meet, Bad Ape, or anytime the little girl Nova was there too. He was able to capture the nice, tender, quiet moments as well. So, speaking of expression for me, this motion capture technology has just come such a long way since the days of Gollum, where we were all googly-eyed at that. Like, how did they do that? That's amazing. But for me, I think if it's not already at its peak, and if there's more to be done, I argue that it's so good that in today's world, that it almost can be considered a prosthetic. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, it's a mask in a sense. And we've talked about Andy Serkis's performance and other motion capture performances before, and there was an argument made how, like, can it be nominatable? Can the Academy Awards, like, start considering a motion capture performance as a nominatable, like, best actor, or even best supporting actor, or whatnot? And I think we were talking about, well, how much of it is the actor, how much of it is the special effect? But I think in today's world, with the technology being so precise and wonderful, that I do liken this to, like, when John Hurt had to put on the mask for Elephant Man, right? Eric Stoltz in The Mask, right? Or any kind of, like, Sofia Boutella in, say, the Star Trek movie. Anytime when there's a prosthetic used, people will still look at the performance and say that it's fantastic. And I think that I'm making the argument that in today's world, the Academy should at least open their minds and start thinking about looking at performance like Andy Serkis, mm-hmm. because, you know, it's not the mask that makes the character, it's the actor that makes the prosthetic and or the motion capture. And I really do think that Caesar, Andy Serkis's Caesar, is something that should at least get those gears clicking with Academy members to say, maybe we can, maybe we should, because motion capture has gotten so good. You know, and I think that the way that Caesar, he's a flawed leader, right? And I think it's the writing, but I also think it's because of his performance. He's prone to mistakes. He's not the best leader, but he's flawed, but he does the best at what he can with what is around his environment. And you really feel bad for him because he's trying to make informed, right decisions for his clan, his group. And sometimes it doesn't work out the best, you know? And you can really see it, I think, in Serkis's eyes and his performance. And which I just think that, again, this culminates with this movie. I think it's fantastic. So, you know, props to the new girl, Amaya Miller. I believe that's how you pronounce her name, as Nova. I thought she was fantastic as well. You know, I think this is quality science fiction that we're getting this summer. And it doesn't beat us over the head. It mirrors our current society. You know, and I think that it's quality entertainment, for sure.
Fair enough. I really enjoyed this movie. What I appreciated about it overall, and I know some people are kind of going back and forth on it with the title, War for the Planet of the Apes. It's not enough war in this movie, perhaps. But I appreciate the Western nature of it all.
Sure.
You know, which, you know, there's a disconnect between the marketing and what it is, but, you know, the war really is more, yes, there's a physical war, but the war is mentally what's going on with Caesar. Mm-hmm. It's his war that he's really and again, even just that, it's him against the Colonel, and it's his battle against, you know, his ideology. So I really appreciated kind of how they had a lot of great action set pieces and yet stayed very, very tight.
Yeah.
You know, which it could have certainly gone off the rails in terms of going anywhere. And in a weird way, yeah, I appreciated the culmination of this trilogy. I thought Rise was a really good movie overall. Mm-hmm. Each of these has such a different flavor, mm-hmm. you know? And while obviously it's the same story, they're vastly different. They're almost like different genres in a sense.
In a sense. I mean, they both still carry a science fiction element to them. And I always say that science fiction should always be about the human condition. And what this Planet of the Apes, and what the original Planet of the Apes has done, too, is just turn what the human condition is, make you rethink. And to
well, the
your
original,
point,
you know, science fiction, and you could maybe say a buddy comedy esque. Like you have Frank, like because they're dealing with or maybe a coming of age story.
I was going back to the Heston days, like the Charlton Heston days, where that was really great science fiction. This one, what they've done too is, again, they sort of kind of turn it on its heels. When we say the human condition, whose condition are we looking at? Who's more like the humans trying to survive? It's Caesar and company and making those decisions, and that's what I've really come to appreciate, particularly in the last two movies. But you're right, the first one's like a buddy.
Yeah. Well, they take a lot of risks too.
Absolutely.
You have sign language and you have long periods of silence, pretty much for the most part up until the middle to three quarters along the way. And even at that point, the fact that there's mute people, which we'll talk about in terms of the disease, it just, and the fact that you can stay that captivated without dialogue is really phenomenal in terms of being able to capture an audience and keeping it interesting.
Yeah, I remember last week we talked Dunkirk, which is a very similar kind of thing too. A little dialogue, but you're right. In this movie, and this is where I say this is where Reeves, for me in this movie, it was his composition of shots, and this is how I really noticed it. And I did see this in 3D. I don't know if you saw it in 3D, but I saw this in like XD 3D, and again, I just marveled as to how it looked and the great time and care they took to put their shots together. So it helped with the action. It helped with that Western feel of going across the snow, the snow-capped mountains, and it looked beautiful. So the silence only impacted various scenes, and I thought it was great.
Absolutely. Well, so let's talk a little bit development. Pretty much after seeing the initial cut of Dawn, Fox says, we want this guy, we want Matt Reeves to come back, do the third installment as part of this series. So they announced that they were doing it, and it would be co-written along with Mark Baumbach. And they were able to do it. The fun part is, in a sense, in hearing about it, they got to do essentially what everyone ultimately really dreams of, just getting to watch movies. And so through the Fox lot, they just watched movie after movie after movie for inspiration to get into this. And whether that was Apocalypse Now, Clint Eastwood movies,
Empire.
Yeah, all of these movies just for inspiration to really, how do we take that in terms of writing the story and why it is to me so good. We've continued to stay with that central character of Caesar, and this is the culmination of Journey. And they were very particular about, let's make it biblical, let's make it epic, let's make it mean something.
Yeah, and Reeves, to his credit, he's a part of, he's quoted as saying, part of the thrill of making these films is the opportunity to bring new technology and new forms of cinema to classical myths, or creating something unique for these times. And definitely, if you are a lover of film, as we are, you see that peppered throughout this entire movie, yet it is modern day. It's never mundane or cliche. He does take those, you can see where he borrows from Clint Eastwood, and shots are longer. That it's not very quick cut. It's one of the things, again, going into this movie that you just appreciate it from an artistic level, but from an entertainment level. Remember, we are in the midst of summer. This movie was released July 14th, so that's smack dab in the middle of summer. So we're being bombarded by, a lot of tentpole, action-y, explosion-y kind of entertainment, and this movie still fits into that, but it's done with aplomb. It's done with a sense of finesse and style to creative filmmaking that was done in the past, but makes it look new and his own style. You got to appreciate that. And I love the fact that, hey, we're watching movies on the Fox lot,
Absolutely. And they benefited from, part of the reason why they were able to do it was when they did Dawn, they had they had an accelerated schedule in terms of delivery. Here, it kind of got, the release date was a little bit pushed back, and so they were able to have their time.
Right.
You know, and it's not to say that Dawn turned out to be a bad movie, but it's just always nice because especially when we talk about these things, there's always such a deadline to meet. Like, okay, great, the next movie's coming out in a year and a half. Well, crap, we're already out.
Right.
We're a year behind the 8 ball.
Yeah.
Well, get it done anyway.
Did you feel this movie felt rushed to you?
No. I thought, you know, they were given the time that they really needed to be able to tell the story.
Yeah, agreed.
Which was nice. And they knew exactly. I mean, the fact, when you really think about it, we're rooting against essentially our own kind.
True. I get it. Yeah.
And the fact that we're crying. I mean, I know a lot of people. You know, it's a very emotional movie. And yeah, you know, just at a certain point, you're like, please don't kill anyone else. I can't handle this.
Right.
And that says a lot.
Yeah. It raises the stakes, and that's the difference. Like the original, and by the original, I'm talking the Charlton Heston Planet of the Apes. It's a Twilight Zone, and I believe Rod Serling had a hand in writing the screenplay for that. If somebody can check me on that, please. But, you know, it's sort of that Twilight Zone-ish kind of thing. You're still rooting for the humans, right? And it's only when you get to the end of that movie that Charlton Heston realizes, holy shit, he sees the Statue of Liberty. I'm on Earth. What the hell happened here, you know? And so you get that, and it's still a humanistic story in a sense. But this trilogy has been focused on, let's make the apes the humans. Let's make them the sympathetic characters. And humans are bad humans. But the thing about it is that they don't make the villains, they haven't made the villains stereotyped. They're not your stereotypical villain. They've done a good job in providing, like the Colonel in this, you understand his motivation. The guy's nuts. Clearly nuts, right? But you understand his motivation, like why he's trying to do that. And in his explaining it to Caesar, you also get the sense that Caesar is like, yeah, dude, I get what you're saying. You're making sense, but we need to work together. But the guy's crazy. You know, he's lost it. But at least you can understand the motivations.
Well, it comes from the nugget that, I mean, you know, obviously at that point, no one's ever faced this sort of problem.
True.
So, you know, in that sense, like when there's no past barometer to be like, okay,
right.
Well, you know, this worked or this didn't work. Yeah, you kind of have to jump to some sort of conclusion, and yeah, it's going to be thought of as radical and whatnot. And I did, you know, it's not until the end. I mean, even just that, the way they marry the two storylines together, when he goes in there and wants to kill him, Caesar does, and yet stops himself. I don't think he's doing it. I think he is doing like regardless of whether or not the Colonel had his condition.
Right.
I think he would have prevented himself from doing it regardless, because that's just what you know. I see it within him. Like it's almost like Batman, though he may want to do and get rid of the Joker and kill him off once and for all. It's never going to happen.
Right.
But then just seeing him in a state where basically everything that I've been fighting for, I've been wrong on.
Right.
Or now it's hit home, or like it was especially with the son, it was a wasted effort. You know.
Yeah, and that's what that's again one of those things that makes really good science fiction is when you turn the human condition in on itself. It's a mirror, and the apes in this case are a mirror. And I said, you know, Caesar's not like a great leader. He's not like the heroic leader. He's gonna come in and save the day. I mean, he has all that stuff, but he's a leader that actually tries to think things through, and he's flawed in the way that humans can be flawed, because even with all information in front of them, they make a decision via their heart, their conscience. And what I really enjoyed about War for the Planet of the Apes was, again, it's not necessarily a standalone movie, even though they do their best to set you up, and you're introduced to the character of Kobo, right? That's what his name was. And that character in the last movie, Rise, like it was such, again, another villainous character whose motivations you understood, but he just took it way over to the top. But what happened with that character Kobo still plagues Caesar in War of the Planet of the Apes. Like, and it's one of those things like, Jesus, am I becoming him? And so a character even says you're becoming Kobo. Like, if you're doing this for revenge, that's what Kobo was. You have to have other motives. And I just found that they never overplayed that card, right? I thought, and that was really, even through quick flashback or whatever, that was the turmoil that Caesar had to go. He had to look within himself to see the type of person, the type of animal he was or is going to become. And those, I think, are great themes and issues.
Well, yeah, in terms of that struggle, it's very much, what if I'm wrong?
What if I'm, yeah.
It's like, hey, I know, like, and especially the way that movie culminated, it's not like they just disagreed, like, oh, you know what, you got your way of thinking, I got my way of thinking, we're good. You do you, I'll do me. That came to a head.
Right.
And so you have to, in essence, live or die by now what you chose.
Right.
And it's very much like, well, crap, what if I chose the wrong thing?
Yep.
What if I've been wrong all along?
Yep.
And obviously that, because it's, I think the real crux of it is, Caesar, for the most part, never really elected himself as the leader.
No, he didn't.
So and so they're all following him, and he's doing the best that he can with it, and he already sees the mistakes of it. Like, not that he knows initially, but when they're in the caves, which amazing sequence in terms of just the ropes and everything. But,
oh my God!
But
yeah.
even slightly before that, when they're saying like there's a paradise we have to go, and one of the apes is begging like, hey, let's go tonight because they're gonna come back, and you see that real sense of struggle, and yet then in hindsight you realize, well, it's because he sold them out. He knew they were coming. He wasn't just guessing it.
Yeah.
He knew exactly what was gonna happen, and I'm sure that will, I'm sure just like us as an audience, Caesar realized that, like, wow, it's hitting home.
Yep. It's tough, and again, it contemplates what it is to be a leader, right? What moral choices do you have? There were bits I always, you'll laugh because I always seem to, whenever we talk science fiction, I always bring it back to Star Trek, but the early episodes of Star Trek, it was Captain Kirk dealing. A lot of the great episodes were when Captain Kirk is like, I'm responsible for 330 plus members on this starship. Like, if I make a wrong decision, Jesus, like, somebody could die. Like, and those were always the headiest, great human condition stories that resonate as much today when you're watching A War for the Planet of the Apes, because look at what's going on in the world around us, and leaderships and whatever. And people live and or die by decisions that are made, whether it's on a battlefield, whether it's, from wherever. And it's trying, and how does one cope? And Caesar always believed in his conscience and in his heart, and part intelligent. He was also the most intelligent on the block, and I think that's how he got into this position of leadership. But he also led with his heart. He had compassion. He had compassion for the humans. And that's the other thing, too, is in all of the movies, there was always a compassion for the humans. And people would always question, like, why do you show compassion? Look what they're trying to do to us. And the philosophy is, but there are some really good people. We have bad apes, too, but there are some good people that we should try to take care of. And why not? Because maybe then maybe other people will see this. Again, you understand his motivations. This is a movie that comes out in the middle of the summer, and listen to all the various things. Like, this is what you can take out of it.
I definitely want to talk about Noah, but even, what's interesting to me is he literally tries to, at the very least, say, like, I'm going to go on this revenge journey. I understand what it could cost me, but I'm leaving you guys separate of that because this is my cost. It is not yours to bear. And through that, it just seemed at that point like, what do I have to do? No matter everything that I try, it leads to this.
Right.
I can't shake this.
Yeah, he can't shake it. And he's fortunate enough that around him, he has great moral and conscious, consciousness, conscience support through like Maurice, who has grown to be such an amazing character throughout this series. Another like hard not to love character, because he does become Caesar's conscience in a good way. He's part of the crew that offers this opinion of sentiment and heart, and he offers him the paths that he can go down. Bad Ape is a really great character in this as well, as far as he's somewhat intelligent, but he's known as Bad Ape. And what is he doing here? And you didn't want to go too far with this character, but he has his own story, and he lends his... It's a new character that comes in that really adds to making this a good sequel. And then, of course, there's Nova.
And at first, Nova could have just been a metaphor, an object, if you will, for, okay, she's representing the humans, and she's just got to tag along. But then she really comes into her own, and she is beyond just an object. She becomes a character that influences the story.
Absolutely. I love it that she is a nod to the original Charlton Heston Planet of the Apes, Nova. And Nova is proof that, okay, she's afflicted by this ape virus, I believe they called it, where she can't talk, she's mute. But it doesn't, at least in her case, it didn't make her any less smart, didn't make her any less caring. If anything now, through her not being able to talk, she has this whole new language that she can speak with the apes. She and Maurice click. And Maurice is like Caesar. We can't abandon. We can't do this. Then we're no better than Kobo. We've got to be better than that. And this girl who plays her, I thought, was wonderful too. She was a nice breath of fresh air in this movie, which was good to see.
She was, and she got to represent what it's really speaking about and what the driving force is. At this point, the Promised Land really isn't so much for Caesar and the rest of them. It's for the innocence, the new generation that was
Right.
with a son that was made very apparent.
Right.
And so she's represented on the human side of, okay, there could be a whole generation that could live cohesively, and it doesn't have to be this way because they don't know any different.
Right.
Why does it have to be that we have to, be enemies just because that's what people know?
And since we're talking this 12-year-old, and again, I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly, Amaya Miller. This is her first major feature. And Reeves goes on, he describes how Miller won the role. And he's quoted as, Amaya is such an intuitive young actor. When she came into audition, we threw away the script, and I just asked her to relate to the apes. And he says it was clear right then that she was special and had a talent way beyond her years. And she and the actors playing the apes and such, they became family. And you can tell that, number one, finding the right girl to do this or finding the right actor to play this and have a connectivity with the actors around her, you can see that in this movie. And again, she's acting against people who are in motion capture kind of suits, right? So she's not seeing the end game, no. Okay? She's reacting to people in these weird type of suits, and they're acting and reacting to her. I mean, to me, that's movie magic, and that girl's intuitions really paid off, and I think the dividends are great. She was a wonderful find for this movie. Her performance sort of kind of reminded me of that little girl that was in Logan. Mm-hmm. Because that girl had to carry a lot of weight. She had to handle action. Without really saying a whole hell of a lot.
No.
So, yeah.
I agree, and I think one of the things as we talk about Nova, a lot of people are speculating that she's not as emotional about the guy who got killed, and I call him the guy who got killed because people make the assumption that is her dad.
Her dad.
Nowhere is it stated that is her dad.
No.
I think as part of what we later learned, they just left people behind.
Yep.
And that was if they were lucky.
Yeah.
So, that's just whatever. I think he had compassion for the girl. They
Yeah.
somehow found each other, and just he became the. But I don't know if I doubt that she had too much attachment.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I didn't get the sense. I felt that this was some semblance of a camp, and I didn't really get the sense that this was her father.
No.
Because you're right. I mean, if it was her father and she just sees these apes mowing her down, there would have been a different kind of reaction. But there wasn't. There was a more intelligent reaction to it, and I believe I believe you're on point with saying that these are people who are living in this encampment trying to survive, and Nova just happened to be in this encampment. And that guy was a jerk anyways. I knew he was going to pull a gun. He deserved what he got. Bad human. He's a very bad man.
Let's go back to the idea of Bad Ape, because he is that sort of breath of fresh air, and he's used phenomenally because he's a device. You're kind of coming up on the point where you're like, okay, we gotta have some talking soon. Well,
right?
We're not gonna have human characters yet, but all right, we'll give you Bad Ape. So he serves that purpose, but then beyond that, there's the expositional side of it, and then comic relief. Mm-hmm. So the number of roles he serves is just vast.
It's crazy because, well, number one, it's Steve Zahn, right? Who, let's face it, I can't remember the last time I saw Steve Zahn in a movie, and not that we necessarily see Steve Zahn here, but his interpretation of Bad Ape and given what he was able to do is fantastic. You're right, he's a comic relief, right? But at the same time, this character, there's a vulnerability to this character, right? He has levity, but also Bad Ape, he was a dad, and he's also dealing with a particular kind of pain as well. You're right, and to be able to carry all of this off in a character who becomes a linchpin, and someone to raise your arms with and go, yay, Bad Ape. He just became. It's tough. This is the third movie, and we're being introduced to a new character. Where you would think that sometimes you're still getting to know your main characters, but this new character, as well as Nova, flourishes and is given the opportunity to shine. And I think that's, again, the camaraderie that's on here. He was Steve Zahn did a fantastic job.
He did, and he was kind of like the canary in the coal mine of like, we shouldn't do this.
Right.
Which a valid perspective in terms of like, hey, let's just leave well enough alone.
Considering what he lost in life as well, again, you understand motivations, and he's yet just that other opinion to throw into the hat that Caesar has to draw from. Yeah. And
the third sort of dichotomy to it, if you want to call it as such. The donkeys.
The mules, the donkey, yeah.
Well, because from an ideological standpoint, it's who's to say that they're not wrong? Like, as an audience member, we're kind of watching, and we're like, boy, are you dumb for choosing the humans? Or like, because you feel like that at any moment they're just going to screw them over.
Right.
But you could see from there, like, what choice do I have? At least I'm not treated nice, but I'm certainly not treated like that.
Right.
And so it's weird to watch, but I'm glad that they put it in.
It's weird to watch, but if I'm also correct as well, they're aiding the enemy, and we've seen this in actual historic war, in which people will aid the Germans and such, or the Japanese, and we see this done in this movie as well. And to your point, it's like, look, I didn't see a future over here. At least over here, I can sort of have. I think that I'm being led to believe that I'll have a future, and I have to do their bidding because that's what keeps me alive, and I have to survive. Now, not good for the apes. Obviously, you see it as we as humans, and this is why the apes in this incarnation of Planet of the Apes are the humans, and they're seeing these atrocities of war and what revenge can bring, what the humanity can bring, and humanity is turning the humans in this, they're turning their apes against them. They're becoming traitorous. You feel the pain. And again, it all goes to Caesar going, if I was a better leader, maybe he wouldn't have left. But, I couldn't lead like Kobo. That's not my way. So when you have the mules or the donkeys, it's you understand the motivation behind it. They're not good apes either. But yeah, it's one of those layered things, and it's not what you normally expect out of a midsummer franchise summer film.
Yeah,
that's what it's great science fiction.
I want to talk about. Obviously, there's a lot to talk about the camp, but I want to talk about the sort of camp conditions before we get into the action stuff. And we should definitely talk about the waterfall stuff as well.
Oh yeah.
When we do, but from there, it really was interesting to kind of watch how they did it, and because it was such a level of control, like a mind fuck.
Yeah, it was like that. It was like a mind fuck. It was like an internment camp too, to an extent. Again, something out of our own history, and yet putting these people in. Yeah,
but not as ironically not as violent initially as you perhaps would have expected. Like the fact that as I was watching sort of what I would call the rebellion, when Caesar's like, hey, we need water, we're stopping until we get water. It plays out much longer. They could have shot somebody right then and there and like, no, get back to work and put an end to it. But they, the colonel was much more strategic and was sending a far deeper message than just shooting Caesar and being like, all right, back to work, everybody.
Right.
Nothing to see here.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that was a very interesting way to play it that I would have never guessed.
Yeah. Yeah, that scene too. But you see what Reeves and the storytellers and the writers are doing too. They're also building emotion, right? Because you're right. Shoot Caesar, movie's done, whatever. Somebody else has to take his easy out. They didn't choose an easy out. They chose a harder out, and they chose one too that, could have had audiences like, what the hell am I watching here? But I think the emotional payoff at the end is what they were striving for. And they took a harder route, which you have to commend them for. And again, when you have this character like the Colonel, it's so easy to make that character so over the top and villainous. You have to add some semblance of quote unquote humanity to him as well, because he understands Caesar as a leader, and there is the strategy going on, and he knows that if he kills Caesar, probably lost that war in a sense. So I liked how all of those scenes in the camp play very well. And if somebody does get shot, there's an emotional impact. There's a heft to it that we feel as an audience, which I think is great.
Well, that's certainly where the biblical references come into it when Caesar's essentially crucified.
Mm-hmm.
And even just the way they taunt him, like, oh, you want water? Boom, right in his face.
Right.
Not really giving him water, just,
let it drip off him. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, degrading him further.
Yeah. Tough scenes, too. Again, we put ourselves in that scene. They're the human, and he's the sacrificial, he's the Christ figure. And you said it was a crucifix, and that's pretty much what it was. And it's a means of torture. That again, we've seen this in various movies. You can go as far back. Angelina Jolie's movie about that runner who was captured and tortured during World War, right? We've seen this sort of kind of torture happen before. Does it make it any less worse that it's apes who have humanistic conscience? No. If anything, it's equally as impactful. But that's what good science fiction should do. It should impact and you should look at it and go, Jesus, that sucks. That's horrible.
Let's kind of switch gears, talk about the action. I guess let's start with the waterfall stuff, because then once we get to the end, we're kind of at the end of things.
Right.
But you keep mentioning how well it was shot and things like that. Like, I mean, we've seen Marine movies, we've seen Army movies. I've never seen something of this nature. It was so subtle. So it's not like they did something like astronomically different, but they just used lighting and editing and pacing and music and all this stuff to their advantage.
Absolutely. Yeah, couldn't agree with you more. Culmination of all of that, and particularly the editing and cinematography. And again, this is going to go back to Matt Reeves' direction. We're inside these caves. And how do you build this up to a culmination? And it was very quiet, too, right? And that's another thing. And it was the use of the green laser lighting, right? And then the way that it's editing, and they know that they're being infiltrated till it comes up to we're in the falls. We're at that scene at the falls. Again, it builds. It was the way in which it was shot, edited, directed, performed. You get that there was a genuine thing of stakes. Like, there was suspense. No. You sort of had the feeling, I will say, there was Caesar's son. Like, it was, albeit sad, but those stakes were there, and you had the feeling that they were going to sadly meet their end, mistakenly, because you thought they were Caesar.
But even just the fact of just seeing the Colonel.
Yes.
Just eye to eye, seeing, like, because it's one thing they could have easily had him kill this, anyone they wanted ultimately, and then boom, they're gone. Okay, but just pitting the two of them together, and the reason why you're put into that, seeing the rage within Caesar, not even at that point it wasn't really technically rage, it was just pure sadness, and from the Colonel it was mockery.
Yeah.
Like, come and get me.
Yeah, and again, I'm gonna go. This goes to, for me, both of their performances. I thought Woody Harrelson was really great in this movie. He even outshined, like, Gary Oldman was really good in the last Planet of the Apes as the villain, but I really think Woody Harrelson as the villain here was fantastic. But I'm gonna talk about Andy Serkis too, because this is another level of his performance that wasn't relied on. Like, I can honestly feel and believe that this was performance. Like, he didn't have to have the special effects do the performance for him, okay? Like, this is true. When you look at Andy Serkis and his face and what he's able to emote, I believe that I was watching a fantastic performance, and I felt his loss. I felt his pain. I felt his anger. When he goes running for him to dive, like, that was a really good scene. And it's played out so much better than the fight scene that he has at the end with Gary Oldman in Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. And it didn't take place on the scaffolding, because I think we talked about that in Dawn. But that was a really intense fight scene, and what's going to happen. Played out very well. And again, I got to say, in 3D. The levels of the water, the people, the rope, swinging. It was great. It was laser light. It was fantastic. Just fantastically done. He has a great flair. I think Matt Reeves has a good flair for action, and albeit one of my favorite scenes in Dawn, and it's still today, is, we talked about it, is the tire that's sort of kind of on fire that the camera follows throughout all these scenes of gunfight in that movie. I was hoping that there would be another flourish like that. Didn't get it, but no less a grander movie than Dawn. But he has an amazing flair, and it really is about, how am I choreographing this? How am I going to show this to the audience? And he's got, from a visual standpoint and telling a story, I think he's fantastic. Yeah. I really do. I look forward to his. I always look forward to his work. He's got that. There are very few, and I'm glad that he's around. I always talk. James Cameron has this visual flair as well for composition of shots. We can all go back to Scorsese, Kurosawa, Clint Eastwood. they all learn from great people. Spielberg. It's just the way a composition of a shot and what they've given us that through film history, it just stays with us. And it's how you film an action scene. We talk about action a lot. Well, never over-edited.
No, I mean, one of the things that really stood out, they're able to use multiple levels. And when we go back to the idea of the donkey, the fact that Caesar needs to blow up this tank.
Right.
They play that very perfect. Because it's so slow, and you can see the mechanisms working in terms of everyone's what they're thinking, and just the shift from then the donkeys realizing like, oh wow, I've chosen the wrong side, right. Or this is my kind. I see the wrongdoings of this, and being able to help out Caesar in that moment. It takes an action scene. What could have just been like, okay, grenade, blow it up, boom, into something extraordinary.
Mm-hmm. And that scene is great, too, because that scene in this movie is one of the, I remember seeing it, that was one of the major applause. And again, that explosion sort of came out of nowhere. Mm-hmm. Like you didn't and you're like going, oh my God, it was one of those applause moments in this movie. And at this point, too, if I'm correct, Caesar is mortally wounded, So the mere fact that he can continue to carry on, you're just like going, he's on pure 100%, like, will right now. Adrenaline and will to get this done, to save humankind. Yeah, and that was it was a great scene. Again, adding more layers. But you just attribute it to the writers and the director for how that goes. Because they could have gone the easy route, but they never went the easy route.
Well, I want to get your opinion on this, because some people are saying the easy route was, there's a Deus Ex Machina with the avalanche now killing all the humans.
Sure.
To which I say, do you understand that the avalanche came because everything blew up? You can't have an explosion that size on mountains, and they're not going to, so there's a cause and effect.
Exactly.
Sure, there's no foreshadow to tell you like, oh my God, there's going to be, but there's a cause and effect because of that explosion that we're talking about.
Right.
That the avalanche comes, and you know what? Yeah, the monkeys are just, the apes are better because they can climb trees, and humans are dumb.
Yeah.
Like, how is that a Deus Ex Machina?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I didn't find that. I mean, and let's face it, the humans, they knew about the Colonel, but they weren't really there to save the apes either. They were there to take this Colonel out because he's Kurtz. He's Apocalypse Now. Like, we got to get this guy. We got to get this guy out. He's a nutbag. He's not helping our cause. He's only making matters worse. But they really weren't there on the ape's behalf either. They weren't saying, oh, good ape, we understand this guy's crazy. We're going to kill him and then you'll be... No, they were going to take him out and more than likely take the apes out too. So they weren't good guys, per se. They were just on their mission, and the apes were there, and they were more than likely shooting them too.
Yeah.
So...
Yeah, which is certainly the Colonel made that point of like, oh, you think when the time comes, they're going to care about you? Or whatever he says, paraphrasing. So 100%. And I just don't buy into the fact that it came out of nowhere. It came because of the explosion.
Yeah.
What else do you need?
It's an avalanche. Yeah. Just avalanches have been started by sneezes. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go to Avalanche Nation, wherever that may be, and see how easy it is to start an avalanche.
See Everest.
Anyway, what other story elements or action scenes do you want to touch upon that we might not have already touched upon? I know we definitely have to talk about the ending. Paradise. But
the ending in Paradise, very nice. His use of like the fighter jets, the planes. And again, when we're talking about action scenes too, we're also in a world today, cinematically anyways, where, and I think when you look at history of action movies, like a Die Hard movie, right? Like Die Hard, where you're on the edge of your seat because there are multiple things going on. that, you know, that they're telling this story. So action A is happening over here, but action B is happening, which could meld into action A. So we're getting these grander scenes, and the same here in Apes. And to me, it's all about how are you piecing this together? Because there are many things happening at once, and we've seen movies where that happens, and you become confused. Wait, what the hell? Where am I? What the hell is going on here? Not the case for War of the Planet of the Apes. You had a really great sense of geography as to where this group of apes were, how this group of apes is under the tunnel and the sewer system and coming up. I always use Avatar as an example of James Cameron himself is great at laying out our geography so that we have a sense of place, whether it's Avatar and even Titanic. These to a good seasoned director and storyteller like Matt Reeves, he's able to, we're not confused as to where we are, who's fighting whom, who's escaping. I think it plays a key part in all of the action here, including the caves at the beginning, right? It wasn't quick cut, so we're not who's killing who on this and what's happening. You get a good sense, and editing is used how editing should be used. Not to confuse an audience or make an audience dizzy. I can actually see the action play out. And again, it's all down to storytelling and how things are looking. But it's a big undertaking because you know they're not all filming it at once. They're filming it scene by scene. But they're having their idea, whether it's pre-viz or storyboarded out. It's okay, but then we're going to cut over here. So, yeah, I think it was done very, very, very well. And again, I have to say, the 3D, which they filmed in native 3D, which is becoming more and more popular, it was just, it looked spectacular. They did a fantastic, fantastic job. I can't think of any other scenes that came to mind other than, say, the quiet scene when they came across the ski lodge. Mm-hmm. Like, that was like a really well done. It was our breather before the war.
Yeah.
And I just liked, it was beautifully shot. It was peaceful, serene, and white. You know, not an action scene at all, but very integral to the progression of our story. It was a sanctuary for 5 minutes.
Absolutely. Well, I want to start to kind of shift gears into the production side.
Sure.
Michael Saracen was the cinematographer, done movies such as Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, did the last Planet of the Apes, which was Dawn, Midnight Express, even, you know, that's dating back to 1978.
Right.
So movies such as that. So obviously been around for quite a number of years, worked on quite a number of movies. But in terms of that, you know, I know you have tons and tons of stuff about Weta. What I found fascinating was the fact that, you know, when you talk about motion capture, and I've been kind of holding off on this, but when you talk about motion capture, there is a lot of people that are credited with, you know, bringing the CGI to life. Right. And yeah, Matt Reeves makes it a point whenever he's done sort of speaking engagements and Q&As. And by the way, in some sense, you kind of feel bad for the guy because he never really gets to talk about the story. It's always about the technology. He's like, right. But what about the story? The story's like, that's why the technology is there to make the story amazing. But anyways, he's a good sport about it, obviously. During the CGI process, he's very meticulous in saying, okay, how did Andy do it, or how did these people do it, and match that. Mm-hmm. You know, add the layers you need to, but it's got to match this performance.
Absolutely.
And so I appreciate that meticulousness.
Yeah, and everything that they've been doing in this movie too have been quote unquote firsts. We don't think of it that way. We always think because we're so bombarded by technology in movies and special effects. So Saracen, number one, I said earlier, he filmed in native 3D, and he actually shot on a brand new Arixa, is that how you pronounce that camera? 65 millimeter digital. They shot this movie, which I find is like fascinating, right? So, but here's the thing: the first time, when they were working on Rise, yes, we'd had Gollum, but Caesar is he's like a main character, right? So this is the first time that motion capture has been used in extreme weather, including like falling snow. And we had to take the process already considered very sensitive and carefully calibrated into areas with sub-freezing temperatures and snow flurries. So this is the first time basically that it was taken out into nature. So when Andy Serkis' Caesar is on his horse and there's snow and he hits a branch with snow, I mean, this is all very new technology, which we sort of kind of take for granted. But they have been upping this motion capture, like I said, to new levels and new heights, which really allows the performance to come through. And this is what I was saying earlier. You have to match it to, they're matching it to the performance. So, and it's not like the digital technology where they're putting Peter Cushing's face onto an actor so he can play Tarkin. Okay, this is creating a character, and Andy Serkis is performing, and they're just making him look like an ape. This is why I'm arguing that it's a prosthetic on him, because you can make a prosthetic. Anybody who's under a prosthetic should be able to emote, right? If you're a good actor.
And it's a good prosthetic.
And it's a good prosthetic. Right. Yeah.
I mean, if I put a box over your head and call it it's a little bit different.
Hey, look, the unknown comic on the Gong Show is able to still crack up jokes, but you're right. But this, in a sense, is just a prosthetic in which an actor has to emote from. And I truly, honestly believe, like, putting the layers on, the special effect isn't making Andy Serkis smile. It's not making him look sad. That's all Andy Serkis, right? So I just think that's why I believe that it's incredible, because now we're at a point where it really is a performance capture than it is even more so. In fact, just call it performance capture, because that's what we're doing. They're capturing performance. And just making him look like an ape, but he's doing all the walking. So,
and going back to the point you had made about the weather conditions and things of that nature. I mean, Warren Miller, still to this day, he makes all the skiing documentaries.
Yep.
And where I'm going with that is to say that there's still a very specific reason why a lot of his movies are shot on film, it's because it's very difficult to take a camera into freezing climates.
Right.
Technology doesn't have a good habit of working correctly in those conditions.
Right.
But yet something mechanical such as film, which has gears and is not, prone to CPUs and stuff like that, still works. Right. And so the fact that they, as you pointed out, were able to do this, I mean, they might as well be in the tundra the entire time.
Yeah.
It's absolutely remarkable. To be able to do that.
Right. And again, too, you got to remember, too, motion capture was born out of being filmed on a soundstage in which you can add the elements of nature. And again, Peter Chernin, who's the producer of these movies, he even said, we were the first to shoot in the woods. Now we're going to mountaintops and in the snow. People don't know how extraordinarily complex it is. Wet fur. This is another thing we've talked about, whether we're talking about Zootopia, right, an animated movie, or Skull Island, right? One of the things I always say, wet fur is the hardest thing to get. And these actors are out in snow, which is always going to be getting wet. How do you get that done? So, Dan Lemon, who's the visual effects supervisor on all three movies, real-time facial animation tools now allow artists to execute complex and precise a facial animation decision, allowing them to recreate any expression and honor the fidelity of the actor's performance and for hundreds of characters in a scene. Like, how many times? The camp is a perfect example, right? All those extras, not apes, right? that's amazing what they were able to accomplish. And they didn't just take one ape and then copy it and then put it into a crowd.
No, it felt very much independent of.
Very much. And so Ryan Stafford was catch this. He was supervising some 50 visual effects personnel and overseeing a 10-person witness camera unit, an array of 35 to 45 motion capture cameras, as well as an army of data wranglers, surveyors, and photographers gathering information on every detail of each of the set. Because we didn't know while shooting what elements might ultimately be created as CG, they had to shoot everything. And then we 3D scanned every inch of the set. So they go above and beyond, which is smart, because you pick up shots we don't know. Yeah. Just shoot it all. And I get that adds to a budget, but it's just a smart way to do it.
Absolutely. And from the editing perspective, it's an interesting way to look at it, because obviously you're going to have sequences built out and you can throw stuff to the visual effects department, but in essence your time is a little bit limited because you got to have this thing done. You don't want people wasting their time on stuff that's getting cut, etc., especially when you're at that level. And
you're right, and even to your point, they shot most every shot twice, sometimes up to 4 times, to ensure they had their proper coverage of knowing what to have. It helps when you have a budget, right, to do that. But obviously, in the case of War of the Planet of the Apes, it was to their benefit, because in the end of the day, if they didn't have this, well, then the dreaded word reshoots. We got to go back out. We don't have enough. But they made sure to get themselves quite some great coverage.
I think, and I think they got coverage, essentially covering their ass, but at the same time, there could be a sense of that where you don't know what you're doing. Right. So then it takes longer because you're like, okay, well, what do we cut to? How do then you're just kind of left with too much.
Right.
So you got to be able to. That can be an advantage or it can be a disadvantage.
Sure.
And sometimes it is a disadvantage if you have that inexperience. So I think they very much used it properly without having it be a hindrance.
Yeah, and at the same time, they're still creating technology. Do you realize they had 3 new concepts of special effects technology that they were working that was put into this movie? One of them being a new organic forest growth software known as Totara, Totara. And this next generation simulation tool, it emulates nature's own growth patterns. Okay? So allowing trees to adapt to plant life surrounding them. It even makes changes to shape and color caused by aging over time. New growth is red, then leaves turn green and naturally brown. That's crazy. So they have basically a digital geranium that changes. They used an advanced fur system that surpassed all the other previous Apes movies. Brought new levels of complexity, how digital fur behaves, interacts with the world. Particular need to mix fresh snow with fur drove innovation as the visual effects team worked through how snow sticks to fur, clumps onto fur. Caesar, catch this, Caesar alone had nearly 1 million strands of hair that they had to put on there. Crazy. And then the last one is something called a Manuka Sci-Light tool set. This newly built tool set models with pinpoint accuracy how cameras pick up and respond to light. So the result is that the war team was able to light the apes similarly to how a DP would light, with all the same photographic rules applying to those used on a sound stage. So this is how they were able to bring it outside. Mm-hmm. That's incredible to me. So. I think, it's a testament to this collaborative effort of movie making magic. You don't think of all the stuff that goes into this, and you just think it's a simple special effect. But I love learning about War of the Planet of the Apes, because I would never think that we've never been outside with motion capture, like especially in the previous Apes movies.
To me, it's I don't know. I would argue this is one of those flip examples where, like take a movie like Wonder Woman, which is crushing it still. And we, one of the things we want to talk about story, we want to talk about the production side of it, but we got bogged down in that one talking about the historical context of a female director and what that meant,
right,
and whatnot. And I'm not discrediting that. We had a great conversation, but I'm just saying it took, that became the primary focus over everything else. And with a movie like this, what's amazing is like obviously the what they were able to accomplish, and yet I think we're discussing that more in terms of than the amazing story. And it's almost like I feel what's sad to me in some sense is that the story is almost not given enough credit to what it really is, because all of these things I applaud them 100%, but it was always in service of what is an amazing story, because we've had the flip side of it where we're like, okay, the story sucks, but the production effort, we have to applaud the production effort.
Right. No, and I was thinking that at the top of this show, we were doing really great. A great service to the story, because again, George Lucas has always said this: special effects are a tool. If you don't have a story, you don't have a movie. And that, to his credit, he's absolutely correct. Special effects should be used as a tool. What's brilliant about Planet of the Apes is that you don't think of the special effect. You don't think of, Jesus Christ, they were actually filming outdoors, and that's hard. We don't think about that because we are engaged in the story of Caesar and his war for the Planet of the Apes. So that is what I loved the most. And I was only thinking of motion capture only because of where we have come as far as the technology is today, and what Andy Serkis was able, and all of the other apes too. I mean, you know what? I didn't even realize that Maurice is played by Corinne Konoval. She's a female, right? It's like, but Maurice is such a wonderful, sympathetic character, and what she brought to life to this character in the past, I believe Maurice has been in the 3 movies, is amazing. What Steve Zahn was able to accomplish and bring through is unlike anything I've seen Steve Zahn play before. We've come to a point where we're not thinking of this as a special effect.
Yeah, it just is.
Anymore. It just is. And when you have a really good story, it makes it fun in in this world, in the anatomy of a movie. It's what we do. But it makes talking about the special effects that much more fun. Yeah. Right? Because we pay attention to this in this forum. That's why I always say we're unlike any other movie review show, because we're here to love the process, right? Whether we like or dislike a movie, we love the process. And sometimes the process gets lost, sometimes the story gets lost because of the process, right? But we always bring that to light. And I really think that, in talking about the process, let's talk about the acting. Let's talk about what it takes and what they did as far as the apes are concerned. They actually had an ape camp. Terry Notary, who played an ape, he before production began, actor and choreographer Terry Notary convened what became affectionately known as Ape Camp, where the actors submersed themselves in ape behaviors, fine-tuning their movements, rhythms, and timing. And they had the veteran cast, along with the newcomers, who had to confront new reality for the apes. And that, to me, is crazy. An ape camp begins unexpectedly with 20 minutes of sitting. That's it, sitting. And it's funny, new actors always ask, so what do I do? How do I do it? But the first thing is, you don't do anything. Instead, we undo everything. That's the key. Through the course of these films, I've found it's not about trying to channel an ape at all. It's about dropping deeply into yourself, softening and widening your perception while being really open and vulnerable. And I've learned by playing Rocket that it's the most honest way. And you can see that this is a performance. They're not mimicking apes. Each one has their own personality because of performance, story and everything as well. But because of performance, you're able to pick them out. more of those strides that you necessarily don't think about because you're already engaged into what's a really good story, and you love Maurice. Maurice is a great, you know.
He's absolutely I mean, he's. He kind of really ends the story for us.
Sure.
He bookends it because he's, it's him and Caesar, and then Caesar passes away, and although a very sad moment, they're tears of joy.
Yeah.
Rather than, like, we've just seen so much sadness throughout the movie that it's you might be crying, but you're just relieved.
Yeah. And let's face it too, I mean, we could have easily lost Maurice as a character, which would have been a bummer, But Maurice turned into this really great conscience for Caesar. And you're right. It's at the end of the movie. We are in this paradise, so to speak. The sun is coming out. They all realize where they're at. And they have Nova with them. And for the first time, and at least Caesar got to see it, there's hope amongst the humans, the apes. There's hope.
And I enjoyed that. I thought that was a nice way to send him off because, that you could have very easily chosen to get rid of him when he throws as soon as he throws the grenade, because he's done, quote, his part. And that's it. And he fulfilled his wish. But for him to really also, for however a brief moment in time, to really bear the fruits of his labor was a nice send-off.
Yeah, I agree. Very much so. I don't know what this means for next, if there will be Apes installments. And I'll be honest with you. If this is the last of this series, I'm fine because it told a 3-act story. That's the other thing, too. When we're talking about story, this movie had its 3 acts. Even though it plays the 3rd act to a larger trilogy. And they each had their conflict to overcome. And if this were to be the end, so be it. I'm happy.
And as of right now, there's announcement of a 4th according to sources. To that point, it'll be so. They'll have to use the strengths of Maurice and the other characters that we know. Obviously there'll be a continuation. We'll get some new characters, but they're gonna have to be very careful of how they do it because, we followed Caesar for 3 movies, and it's his story, and it comes to an end. It's very beautiful, but now you can continue it, but it just depends how you do it. And so I'm curious.
Yeah, I would be curious too as to where the saga goes and how much into the future they go, and are we going to get a reboot of the Charlton Heston,
a soft reboot,
like a soft reboot.
Essentially, it's kind of like it's a reboot within the reboot,
right?
Because you have to, anytime you reset something,
right?
So now that Caesar's gone, you're resetting what the next goals are.
Yeah, and you don't necessarily at this point know much more about humankind other than they are out there.
Yeah, I mean, we never really
are
get
they dying
explanations
off or like what's?
Yeah, the virus. There's the only real evidence of what it is, and you'd have to know it, is from Planet of the Apes. In terms of the effects of it, like you understand that it's severe, but what is it? That's it. Like, how is it spreading far and wide? Right. We know how it spreads. Yeah, just that was a brilliant way to kind of, what seemed like a simple object.
The doll.
Yeah, plays such a big role, and they foreshadowed that in the most subtle yet effective ways.
Right.
So anyway, we'll kind of see.
It'll be interesting.
There's a lot to explore.
It'll be interesting. We do have. I have some really cool video. I have one of Andy Serkis becoming Caesar. And it's that one's a short video. It's like 30 seconds, but nonetheless impactful. If we have that up. Oh, actually, Anthony pulled everything up. He put everything in the system, and it would be okay. Yeah, one says Andy Serkis Caesar, and the other one's Weta.
Forgive.
Weta.
As prepared as War for the Planet of the Apes is, that's how unprepared sometimes we can be, it seems. In the meantime, let's talk music, and then when you have it ready, just let us know.
I want to talk about Gene Kino's score here.
Yes.
Too. Because we talked about him last week for Spider-Man Homecoming. You know, I actually think that, again, I think War of the Planet of the Apes, I thought his score was fantastic. He channeled some of the original, put it in, made it primal. I thought it accompanied the movie fabulously. Action scenes, quiet scenes. How about you? I mean, I thought he did a really good. I thought this was better than Spider-Man: Homecoming.
Oh, by far. I mean, it was subdued when it needed to be. It just accentuated every moment.
It did.
In a grand, it wasn't over the top. It wasn't overbearing. It didn't overstay its welcome. It wasn't like, hey, here's music. It slowly came in, and without even realizing it, it's heightening the moment. Whether that's sadness, whether that's happiness, whether that's war.
And it played primally as well. It had those primal instruments and sounds. And again, that comes back from the Charlton Heston era. But he channeled that, I thought, very well. And he made it unique to this story that it's inseparable. You know, you can't take it out because I think it would affect the movie. And it looks like that video might be up for us to watch. So here's Andy Serkis.
Getting ready to shoot some apes. Here we go.
It is my hope that out of this solemn occasion, a better world will emerge out of the blood and carnage of the past. A world founded upon faith and understanding. A world dedicated to the wish for freedom, tolerance, and justice.
If you're watching, he transformed from just the performance to him, and just seeing in that context, no difference.
Right? I mean, and again, this is where we come. It's performance capture. This is what we're doing. I think that, and again, if you're a science fiction fan, that 30 seconds right there encapsulates what great science fiction is. I mean, he's an ape, but isn't that what humankind should be standing for? It should be hoping for. So, it's a really cool scene. Also have some really great Weta footage. And Matt Reeves is there, cinematography is there. Andy Serkis talks about what went behind all this and how certain scenes were shot. I think it's very fascinating. I find it fascinating. I hope you guys find it fascinating too. And it goes a little bit more in depth than just staying on Andy Serkis. So why don't we give that a shot?
Okay, here we go. And action.
Who doesn't like apes riding
War
horses?
for the Planet of the Apes, at its heart, is about the intimate relationship between these characters. What's so exciting is that we are capturing the actor's performance, tracking that into these photoreal apes.
You're him. You're Caesar. I fight only to protect apes.
You're not just standing in for the role until the magic's done later on. You're not just representing the character. You are the character for real.
Andy Serkis is an incredible actor. He has such an understanding of Caesar from the inside.
You're letting us go? Tell your colonel, leave us the woods. He will see we are not savages.
When you're in the audience, what you're really looking for is that emotional connection.
That can't be done by just somebody in a gray suit that's just doing the body movements. That has to come from trained talent.
You come to save your apes?
I came for you.
Weta is a high-level visual effects company. They are the best.
Between what Andy did and Weta did, the audience can become Caesar emotionally. Weta is creating pure artistry for us. All of those details that make the illusion complete, Weta is pushed that further.
A typical shot will start with capture being done on set.
Weta can take this motion capture data and make that translate into a character that you actually can relate to. And action, Andy.
The way that you can read genuine emotion has reached another level.
Oh no!
It looks insanely realistic. It's just such a brilliant technology, and I've embraced it, and I actively want to push the boundaries. So that this movie is the most thrilling on every single level.
Apes, together, strong.
So there you go.
That's great stuff, and I really do think that it strengthens my argument.
Absolutely.
I mean, special effects, yes, but Academy, just start thinking about it. Start discussing it amongst yourselves, because this is a performance, and it's not done by a special effect. The special effects is a tool in this case, in which I believe the performance enhances the special effect.
Absolutely. So let's talk about the culmination of these efforts in pure numbers. Usually we do this a week after the fact. This one we're doing a little bit later. So I have, as of July 30th, $224 million globally.
Yeah, it's gone up a little. As of, I can say, I have information as of domestic total as of August 3rd. Is 124 million plus. They're foreign, 110. So worldwide, $234 million. Obviously, like the foreign amount is 47% of the total box office, 53% domestic. It's not that far of a schism there, from a percentage-wise. Listen, the movie cost about its production budget was 150. So we're looking on or around and above, say, 200 million all in. And we're looking already, they've gotten over that 234 million. Opening weekend, 56 mil. I believe it came in at number one.
It did, yeah.
And, number one ranked. The movie had a good playability. I think that Fox marketed the movie pretty well. And they gave us an ending to a trilogy that audiences, it was very satisfying, I feel. So, which helps generate a good word of mouth, which cinema score is A-, right?
Yeah. And that coupled with its Rotten Tomatoes, 93.
Yeah.
Very, very high.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Where's the overpraise on this movie? Like, again, I'm going to talk a little bit, going back to Spider-Man Homecoming. I think this is a far better movie than Spider-Man Homecoming was, right? And this is a 93% movie. This is a very well done movie. It's the third in a trilogy that ends very satisfyingly. And I really do believe that it works. I hope it continues. Fox seems to be doing pretty well.
Yeah.
Box office wise.
Oh, but I ironically have kind of a formulaic structure going to all of this because, because Logan and the sort of overall sentiment of that follows Logan, which I won't even say it because that might give some stuff away.
Give some stuff away for what, Logan?
Just by making the comparison, perhaps that's a spoiler in itself, but nonetheless.
Yeah, but we already did Logan.
That doesn't mean everyone's seen Logan.
Yes, they have.
You can't assume that. Anyway.
I will.
All right. I'm sorry.
But,
sorry, people.
A-, again, this is a good audience reaction. People like the Apes movies. They really have. I mean, especially, think about it. I love Tim Burton. Okay, but that Tim Burton Planet of the Apes.
Never saw it. Don't care for it.
Not such a good movie. And again, it's a really good study into your film history, if you like, because that literally was a battle. That was a battle of the Planet of the Apes that Tim Burton had to fight, and hence we get the movie that we get. You wait a few years, they retool it, but the taste of that Planet of the Apes is still in people's mouths, And so how do we do this? But they did a really good job, And they did a good job setting the table. James Franco, his dad, Alzheimer's, trying to come up with this, but instead it makes apes smarter, but the side effect is it's starting to kill humanity off. We see cruelty in the first one, then the second one, the virus is pretty much taking over. Like we're seeing, it's just, this series has just been done very well and told with years gaps in between, but we get it. We're still here, and the apes and Caesar are still fighting with consequences from previous movies. It was very smartly done.
Absolutely. And the interesting part is it still has yet to release in a couple of markets internationally. So it's still going to be released up until like September.
Sure.
So exciting revenue potential there as well, which I'm happy for. So
Me too.
I want to see it really do well. All right. Final thoughts before we wrap out tonight.
Again, just it's really good science fiction that we're getting smack dab in the middle of summer. The second half of the summer has really been delivering some entertaining quality pictures, and I think War for the Planet of the Apes is a very good example of that and what we're getting. So if you haven't seen it and you're watching us, well, go and see it. But yeah, I really I walked away from this movie going, I can't think of another trilogy in which the movies got better. Mm-hmm. They in this one, they actually, one movie was better than the other, I thought. So it was a really solid trilogy.
It crescendos to a nice culmination for Caesar.
It does.
And it's a very beautiful ending shot. It's a very beautiful sentiment. And with that, hopefully this is a very beautiful ending to a beautiful podcast. Thank you guys, as always, at D Movies.
I'll die right now. See how beautiful that is? People would applaud. Hey, at D Movies.
Why so grim?
1701. Support me. I've been having some awesome conversation with some of the people who followed me, who followed me on Twitter. Also, I gotta say thank you for those people too who watch us on YouTube. Comments have been really solid and good. People welcomed us back because we had our little hiatus. It was really nice. Kaya, Straight Edge, Veganable, some of our regulars come back. They've had some really great comments to read. For Twitter, I just want to thank you for either liking and retweeting some of my stuff or even asking me a question about what I thought about this movie. It's fun. I love talking about movies. So, and thank you, Phil, for Anatomy of a Movie. No, seriously, this is I always consider it an honor to sit in this chair, and it truly is. It really is. So I appreciate that, and the people who watch us.
It's truly an honor to have you guys as an audience. Please continue to comment. We love discussing with you guys. And also, shout out to the audio people. I know you don't always get the recognition that you guys deserve, but obviously you guys are there. You guys have a voice in your own right. So don't feel this. Don't feel that your voice isn't counted on as well, and that we appreciate you just the same.
Absolutely.
And definitely check out past anatomies, whether it is we did like a roundup of the Planet of the Apes. We've done Planet of the Apes in the past, so we definitely covered enough of that stuff. We've covered Andy Serkis movies, and so just a lot there in our library, and a lot to look forward to. Today we're also going to have Atomic Blonde. In the coming weeks, we've got a lot of exciting stuff going on, and hopefully we'll get the chance to, if permitted by the movie studios, that we'll get to do the fourth Planet of the Apes. And I say that not because they wouldn't have us do it, but they got to put it out first.
Yeah, and also like movies like Ghost in the Shell and Skull Island, they've all been released recently on Blu-ray, and we did some great shows off of those movies. So if If you hadn't seen them and you're watching them either on demand or the Blu-ray, check out our past shows because we talk about them. We have great insights and behind-the-scenes footage to those too, and we talk about what fun movies they've been.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
It's a fun film library, if you will. All right, guys. See
Bye,
you
all.
next time.
Producers Maria Menounos, Phil Svitek, and the rest of the Anatomy of a Movie staff. We would like to thank you for listening and subscribing to the show. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to email or tweet us. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been Anatomy of a Movie.